Anyway, let's get into our top 10. Number 10, CMC, Christian McCaffrey from the 49ers. Number 9, Fred Warner from the 49ers. Number 8, Tyreek Hill, Miami Dolphins. Number 7, Nick Bosa, also from the 49ers. Number 6, Chris Jones from the Chiefs. Number 5, Micah Parsons from the Dallas Cowboys. Number 4, Justin Jefferson, Minnesota Vikings. Number 3, Trent Williams from the 49ers. Number 2, Myles Garrett, Cleveland Browns. And number 1, surprising nobody, Patrick Mahomes from the Chiefs. All right, let's pick apart the top 10.
I don't really know how I can do that. It's extremely difficult to move anybody on this list. When I looked at the top 10, I initially was like, should Chris Jones and Justin Jefferson kind of flip spots there? Like you put Chris Jones at 4, put Justin Jefferson at 6. I think I like that a little bit better just because Jones has been such an unbelievable takeover player in the biggest games when Kansas City just has built their entire defense around him and he just continues to deliver. I mean, it's been a worthwhile strategy for them. That's why the thought of losing him in free agency was sort of unthinkable because there's no way the Chiefs would be able to go on a three-peat run without him. I really do believe that for as great as Patrick Mahomes is. They would have needed Chris Jones, and I think that Chris Jones could be in the top 5. Again, I think that you could flip Justin Jefferson and Chris Jones. 49ers are just an embarrassment of riches at this point. This offense is unbelievable. 4 players within the top 10. You're throwing George Kittle in there as well. I mentioned Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. I thought Brandon Ayuk could be even 20 spots higher than what he was. And the amount of players that they have on this list is crazy. Again, I don't really have too much that I would change outside of the fact that I would move. Again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I would move Allen probably above Warner. So I would have Allen at 9 at the very least. And then I'd be bumping one of those guys, Fred Warner, Christian McCaffrey, just outside of the top 10, which, outside of the top 10, they'd be number 11. You'd still be splitting hairs anyways. It's just, this is a really solid top 10. There are probably, like we just have talked about many times, there's probably like 15 players that should be in the top 10.
Right.
But unfortunately, the math doesn't math there. So it's hard to look at any combination of those 15 players and truly criticize them for where they are in the top 10 list. I think it's a really solid, well-built list.
It's funny, like sometimes when you do these lists, like the sort of optics of it bother you more than the actual rankings or the actual position of players. So to me, I don't like there being such a gap between Justin Jefferson at 4 and Tyreek Hill at 8, right? To me, those are like a coin flip of they're very different wide receivers, but you're effectively talking about the 2 best wide receivers in the game, 2 unique, unstoppable playmakers, and separating them that much feels wrong. But then you're like, okay, Tyreek Hill, is he better than Nick Bosa? Is he better than Chris Jones? Is he better than Micah Parsons? Like, maybe, but not to the point where I'm, I can't go. I can't.
At that point, it's really hard to. At that point, it's really hard to say like one extremely elite player at his position is better than the other.
Right.
And that's what you're doing there. Like Nick Bosa versus Tyreek Hill, Tyreek Hill versus Chris Jones, Tyreek Hill versus Micah Parsons. Like, it's just extremely dominant football player versus another one. They just they play on different sides of the ball in completely different positions.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then obviously you've got that issue with the edge rushers of these like 5 different, defensive player of the year level players. Nick Bosa feels like the one at the moment that gets overlooked the most because like last year, because people still, like, as much as they're getting better at it, people still just look at the sack totals, right? And last year, people were writing Nick Bosa's, like, had a slow start articles because he didn't have many sacks in his first, in his first few games. I forget. I'll dig up the actual numbers in a second.
1 sack in the first 4 games.
Yeah, 1 sack in the first month, right? So that's like, Nick Bosa has had a slow start. But in all 4 of those games, he had a PFF game grade of 85.5 or better. 3 of the 4 were pass rushing grades of 90 or better. Like, he just didn't have the sack, right? That's why looking at the sack total is just not a good way of measuring this. And then by the end of the year, he did have the sack total. Maybe not, all pros at the top of the table money, but he had a lot of sacks by the end of the year.
It's again, I think that people are getting better at recognizing that there are better ways to judge pass rushers in particular than just by sack statistics, because it really is. You have to be able to judge a player on every single play and how they're performing. And Bosa, Garrett, Micah Parsons, like all three of those guys. And obviously, like, TJ Watt has had those years before, but TJ seems to have sort of like roller coaster years when it comes to snap by snap efficiency. Again, that doesn't make him a bad football player at all. You're just comparing him to guys who don't seem to have any sort of dip at all. Like, the worst pass rush win percentage year for Myles Garrett's like 20%. And TJ Watt last year, leading the league in sacks, had a pass rush win percentage of like 15. So Garrett's win percentage is 5 percentage points higher at like the worst of his career, it feels like. I don't have the numbers in front of me there, but that's why we tend to lean on those three a little bit more, because every single snap they're winning on a more regular basis than guys who, might have some more sacks. That's why, like, total pressures, pressure percentage, pass rush win percentage, that's what we lean on, because the more you are winning there, the better chance you have to actually get statistics like sacks and finish plays in the backfield that aren't just opportunistic. So that's obviously where that comes from. And Nick Bosa, it's funny, like, at 7 seems low.
Right. Yeah, like,
where are you going to put him?
The final Watt point, it feels like we just spend our lives in this podcast making one last TJ Watt point. But the one last point I would make, I think it's a very real and fair discussion to sort of debate, how many pressures is worth one of those Watt sacks, right? That's effectively the discussion. Watt makes more impact big plays and other players win on a more regular basis. Which is worth more, and how many of one do you need before you overtake the value of the other? And that's an absolutely fair discussion to have, and theoretically it's an arbitrary line, et cetera, et cetera. But PFF has at least attempted to quantify that, right? PFF WAR is reverse engineering that. It's going through all the plays in our database and discovering, like, where the value is, how much is worth what, and putting a value to it. So we've at least taken a swing at it. And if you look at PFF WAR last season, Watt was number 5 amongst edge rushers. It was all those guys we talked about, and Watt was 5 of 5. So again, incredibly good, incredibly elite, but when you do actually assign a value to all of those plays, the pass rush wins, the pressures, the hits, the sacks, the fumbles, the interceptions, the turnovers, et cetera, when you tally it all up, the PFF WAR said he was 5 of 5 last year. Now, you might have a different opinion, that's fine, but that's at least an exercise that's been done at this end. I don't know if it's been done for most of the people going, you guys hate on TJ Watt, look at his sack total, it's been better. Now, if you've gone through and you've assigned your value to your sack versus your pressures, and you've concluded that, in my opinion, those are worth more, therefore he's better, that's fine. But I don't get the impression that most people have actually done that exercise when they're just concluding that we have a hate campaign against TJ Watt. Including JJ, by the way. Like, I don't think JJ's done that math.